Hello and welcome to Negative Influence, the podcast that's all about photography, whether it be film or digital. I am your host, Justin Allen, and today we are going to be talking with Giles Thurston, a UK-based photographer that focuses on urban and landscape photography. I met Giles through Substack, and I really enjoy his composition and his work with lighting, and asked him if he would like to be a part of Negative Influence, and he was kind enough to sit down and have a conversation with us. I actually thought of you yesterday when I was out shooting. I read your piece on doorways on Substack.
Oh yeah.
And I just got that roll of 500T that I was out testing, and we have this old camper out on my property, and I was like, yeah, Giles takes pictures of doors, so I'm going to take a picture of this thing's door. And it ended up being one of my favorite photos. I haven't shared it yet. So you are inspiring people out there with your doorway piece.
Well, that's nice to know. Like it was my kind of like, I think I might have said like my dirty little secret that I kept hidden. I was like, nobody's gonna like, but it was only because I was out with some other people and they were going, you photograph a lot of doors, don't you? And I was going, yeah, it's really embarrassing. And it's amazing. So I was like, oh, okay. Oh, well, maybe it's not as weird as I thought it was then.
I think what sold me on it was you referring to them as portals, and I'm kind of a sci-fi nerd, so I was like, oh, okay, yeah, those are portals.
Yeah, they are. Yeah, exactly. Because who knows what's beyond them? Most of them we don't go through when we photograph them. We just go, nobody knows what's beyond there. So, yeah.
You have a very unique sense of composition, I think. You do very well at blending the rule of thirds with leading lines. And I don't know if you do this consciously or subconsciously, or if it's just something that you've picked up along the way. But I was interested in what is your main approach when you're going with composition for your photos?
Okay, yeah, that's a good question, really. I mean, the short answer would be, I guess it's kind of instinctive, but I guess there is a bit of logic to it. I mean, I'm aware of the rule of thirds and that sort of stuff. And I guess when I'm looking for shots, then I know that things like lines, shapes, textures are things that I will naturally be drawn to, which is probably why I like doors, because it kind of combines all of them generally, although they can be quite two-dimensional. I guess where I would think about it is if you've got a more complex shot. So let's forget doors, because doors separate conversation. But if it's a general shot and there is a primary subject in your shot, be it an individual or be it more likely in my case, bin or some sort of human object in the shot, then I will maybe think about where I position that, and then I might use the rule of thirds and thinking about it and think about it in terms of how, and I might subconsciously use that in terms of the positioning. But for me, it's then looking at the way the other elements fall in around it. So the leading lines, you say it could be it's something that's sitting in the midground, so therefore I'm using some leading lines, and therefore I'm trying to think about if I have got leading lines, trying to get them close to the corners. Sometimes you can't get them perfect in camera, but with a view in a slight crop later on. So if you can get the lines coming into corners, it doesn't always work. As a recipe I have is I quite like shooting from under things, so under bridges, under underpasses. So again, you're thinking where that line is across the shot, trying to get it into the corner, those sort of things. Yeah, it's a kind of long-winded answer to your question. I guess mostly these days, it's probably more instinctive now. It's thinking about the subject, and it's just seeing the scene and thinking, right, that's it. And then looking at the kind of, I guess, the way the line specifically would fall in, particularly from the corners of the frame, I would guess, would be the way I would think about it.
That's actually a great answer, because I'm always, so I've fallen into the rabbit hole of photography YouTube, where there's all,
dangerous.
It's a nightmare. I've spent so much money, man. But they're always trying to put composition at the forefront of photography. But
yes.
Lately, I've been following the light, as they say.
Yes.
So light has been leading me as far as my photography goes, and I feel like that's an entirely different conversation to have. Is lighting what you think of first, or is it your composition?
So light is generally what attracts me to the subject. So particularly if I'm shooting in an urban setting, it will normally be the light that I see first. So I talked about textures, I talked about lines. Mostly those lines are actually generated by the light. So I'm looking at light and shadow. There's a door picture I shared on Substack a few weeks back. So I live in Ely here in the UK. It's a very small medieval city, existed at the time of the Norman conquest. In fact, it was the last place in the UK to be taken over by William the Conqueror, because it was actually in the middle of a marsh. So we've got a big old cathedral. So there's lots of old architectural elements within in the town central city centre. And so there was one shot I shared of an old sort of wooden door, very old sort of wooden door, with the sort of iron sort of knots in it, classic sort of castles sort of door. It was just it was a normal sized door, but it was what you kind of met. And as I walked past it through the entranceway, through the sort of cathedral walls, all I clocked was just the way the light was falling over the door. And it's that normally attracts me first into it. It would either be a very strong light and shadow combination that I would capture first, or it would be just an interesting combination of lines and textures and stuff like that. And now I've completely forgot what your original question was. I think it was about use of light.
Yeah, I know. I was. Which do you prefer to focus on first? Is the light or the composition? And I think you did kind of answer that. The light leads to your composition.
Yeah. Generally, I would say light is something that I would. So, like for instance, I quite like shooting in bright, sunny days because I know I'm going to get extreme contrasts of light and shade. Most photographers. I mean, you probably see the photos behind me. I do landscape photography. So, but most it's got to be golden hour, it's got to be blue hour. Middle of the day, harsh sunlight doesn't work. I actually quite like that, particularly in more urban environments, or because that I know is going to generate quite harsh light and quite strong shadows. So, yeah, it kind of depends on the subject. But I would think light is something that does capture me, and I find myself saying, "Oh, there's lovely light on that door there. There's lovely light on that wall. The way that's falling on that building, the way it's striking that item, and creating that shade, creating that contrast of light and shade. That probably is where I fall." But then I can think of other instances where it's the other way around, where you just look at the lines and the textures and think, "Oh, that really works really well." So it's a kind of mishmash of both, I think, really.
You said something a minute ago that I've noticed it's a running theme in your Substack posts, was that you don't particularly like to shoot human subjects, but you like to shoot inherently human objects. Is that just a social anxiety thing, or you don't like to approach them? Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, this weekend's Substack post was about I'd say workshop, but it's not really a workshop. It was it's more of an experience, I would say, that Neil James, who does the Photo Walk podcast, if you've ever heard it, he put that on in London recently, and that was very much around. It was called Encounters. It was very much around encountering people or places, and it wasn't a workshop. And so for me, and again, it's a sweeping generalization, I think I say it in my post, for me, workshops are generally about people teaching you basic camera settings and that sort of stuff, and I've never really wanted to go on those because I'm a bit like, well, it's kind of know, I'm not being arrogant, but I think I know how to use my camera, but for something like that, where it was talking more about the storytelling, more about those encounters. And actually for me, I know that actually it is social. I'm naturally an introverted person. I'm naturally a shy person. So, going up to people and photographing people and asking them, "Oh, can I take your photo?" For me, it's just terrifying. I'll kind of naturally just try and skulk in the background and get shots but again, terrified they're going to look at me. I'm that kind of person. So so I think, and judging by what I've said, a lot of that resonates with a lot of people. So for me, I did that because it pushed me out of my comfort zone. I knew it was going to put me in an uncomfortable position and force me to do something a bit different, and it did. Again, I think, as I said in my post, it didn't create a eureka moment where I was like, "Oh right, I'm going to just be asking everybody for their photos now." I still accept it's an uncomfortable thing to do, but for me and my photography generally, as you've said, I think, and I've been around this journey. As I said, I've used a camera for years. When I seriously got back into photography, probably for the last 10 years or so, most of my photography has been linked to my running. I do a lot of endurance running in mountains and stuff like that. So a lot of my photography was taken, using my phone. I'd be out on a run and I'd be capturing it, and mostly they were landscape scenes. So when I thought, actually, I'd had some success with those photographs, and I thought, well, maybe I should get back into, using a proper camera. I had a SLR, digital SLR, but I hadn't really used it. So I naturally thought, well, obviously landscape photography is my thing, and I've, and I do enjoy doing that, and I take a lot of landscape scenes. But I guess what I found is over the last few years is I've kind of, I found myself more drawn to, I enjoyed shooting, going into London and shooting, going into towns and shooting more urban scenes. And, again, there's that kind of nagging thing in the back of your mind that's going, well, you're a landscape photographer. You shouldn't be enjoying, shooting in, and it's not, I'm not doing street photography as such, but I'm shooting people and places and stuff. Obviously there's urban landscapes. So I was going, well, maybe I'm an urban landscape photographer. And then I kind of found myself, more drawn to, subjects like doors and bins and alleyways and things like that. And you're like, it's kind of, and likewise, when I was out in the natural environment, I was less doing the grand vistas and more picking out interesting subjects, so I enjoyed going to, you can't see these, but I've got some on the wall here in front of me, old ruined barns or mine workings or old, and I guess where I came to, and again, I think as I do with everything I write about on Substack, but I think I've written about this, I came to realize when I was looking at it going, well, actually, I enjoy capturing scenes, be they urban or natural landscape scenes, but invariably within those shots, the subject or a strong element of that shots will be a human element. And that's not necessarily a person. That could be something that we as mankind have placed there. It could be the way we've changed the landscape, or it could be, as I said, an old barn. It could be an old telephone exchange junction box sitting, just sitting in the scene. So it can sit within both those contexts, but there will always generally be some element. And I think, I don't think I necessarily came up with. I think it's sort of something of the human landscape, I guess would be a way of saying it. It's the way we have impacted the landscape, either positive or negatively. So yeah, that's kind of where I am at the moment. I'm sure it'll change. Give me 6 months and I'll have come up with another label.
It always changes. I've gone through different phases where when I first got into photography, which shockingly was not that long ago, I started photography about 3 years ago when I had to retire from my job because I was I printed shirts for years, like 17 years. I was a screen printer, and I hurt my back, and my buddy's like, well, come work for my video production company. And then I got hooked on the photography part. But it seems like photographers are always trying to they're trying to label themselves and be like, well, I'm a street photographer, I'm a landscape photographer, I'm a portrait photographer. And it almost feels like they're putting themselves in this little box where they're so afraid of getting out of it that they just stay stagnant, and they're afraid of learning anything. And with social media like YouTube, Facebook, whatever, it feels like people are like, well, this isn't what you normally shoot, so you can't do this. And everybody's afraid to make a mistake or innovate anything because they're so afraid of being different that people will judge it. And I think one of the benefits that a lot of photographers have is that they don't care if they fuck things up. To put it succinctly, sorry. But and I think those kind of photographers are the ones that are kind of drawing people in and changing things for the better. And I think that's something you're doing. You're kind of towing that line of, I don't want to be the urban photographer, I don't want to be the landscape photographer, I just want to be a photographer. If something's interesting, I want to shoot it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It doesn't matter what it is. If I see something I like the look of and tracks my attention, I will capture it. And no matter where I am, no matter what I'm doing. And I think that, again, that's one thing I've definitely done over the last 6 to 12 months is it's like, if you see something, take the shot. Don't walk past something and go, oh, that was good. If you go back, take the shot. Even again, if it's just, picking your phone up out of your back pocket and taking the shot, because if it's caught your eye, there's probably something there. Now, obviously, like everybody, I've got a catalogue strewn with thousands and thousands of, dud images. But just by being, just by taking a shot, and I think, it's getting your eye in, it's just walking and seeing things and going, oh, that could be a potential, that could have potential, and just, it doesn't matter what it is. But yeah, the key thing is take the shot. Don't sort of think, oh, I'll do it later, or I'll get it on the way back, or I'll do it tomorrow, or I'll do it another day, because if you don't take it, you're never going to know.
The light will never be the way it was the first time you saw it when it looked great. Yeah,
exactly.
How often are you? Often are you shooting now?
Well, I think I shoot something every day. So a friend of mine has described me as prolific. He says you're prolific, and I do. I try to. I'm not necessarily with a air quotes proper camera. I probably at least half of the stuff I shoot is with my iPhone. And it's not. You can't control the aperture on it, but it's shoot it in RAW, and then you can pull it and push it and do whatever you want with it. A lot of my shots I take when I'm out running, when I'm out walking. I do have some compact cameras like a Ricoh GR3, which I'll carry with me, if I walk into town, I'll have that with me now. So you've got a bit more creative control. But I generally shoot something every day, even if it's just some random scene here in my home with the light flowing through the window or something. There'll be at least one shot a day, I think. Maybe a few days you might miss them, but you get to the end of the week and there's normally an eclectic mix of shots that I've taken across various subjects. So yes.
How do you like that Ricoh, the GR3?
Oh, I love it actually. I think it's
Really?
for the size of camera it is. It's amazing. I mean, I'm a real latecomer to that. I mean, again, I got it specifically because it was compact. It was something you can stick it in your trouser pocket, your jeans pockets. It's the one I always take out with me when I go out on my bike on a training ride or something, because it just sticks. It can go in the back of my jersey, or it can go in the top tube bag, and it's just really compact. And I've got the one with the 28mm lens, which I quite like. Particularly if you're out and you want to get something that's a bit wider, but then you can get close into something, get some quite dramatic shots. So that I find that works quite well. I really quite like it as a little sort of point and shoot, so to speak. It's good, and I can't believe I think it's something like 5 years old. Is it? It was pre-COVID they launched it. Demanding when's the version 4 coming out, and I mean, I guess other than cranking up the megapixels in it would be, but still it's 20 megapixels. I mean, it's a good, great camera from what I can see for the size it is. So yeah,
I am partial to cameras that can fit in your pocket because I live close to Detroit and I live close to Flint, Michigan, which are not known for being safe neighborhoods.
No.
So it's if anything I could just toss in my pocket and go, I'm like, perfect. And to be fair, Detroit has improved. I walked around downtown there late at night with my buddy a few weeks or months ago now, and it was amazing. It was so nice. There was families out walking around at midnight. So that was great. But Flint, no, I don't like going there during the day. That place is bad.
Yeah.
I think a lot of the problem that some photographers have is that their cameras are big and bulky, and they feel like society is judging them when they like you said, they stop to take a photo. And I know I've done it where I'm out in public and I see this scene and I'm like, I really want to shoot this. But then I get the camera ready and get ready to shoot it. But there's something inside me that says you can't do that because society's going to be worried about what you're doing with that camera.
Yeah, I mean, it is a consideration. I mean, I've got 2 boys, teenagers, but I've done stuff like football, soccer coaching, rugby coaching, all that kind of stuff. My day job is working in software and technology, and I do a lot of stuff in the pharmaceutical and healthcare space. So again, data privacy is a big part of what I do. So I'm a little bit more uber conscious of it. But I think, I'm kids especially. It was. Again, I'll give you a good example from the other week on the Encounters workshop. I was in Trafalgar Square in London. Very popular place, lots of tourists about. The challenge we've been set was movement. I'd gone there thinking, there's loads of pigeons in Trafalgar Square. It's what it's known for. Less these days than when I was a child because they stopped feeding them now. But there used to be millions. But there was this small child, lovely. I mean, toddler, probably 2, 3 maybe, was chasing the pigeons around, and you thought that's amazing. That would be, a movement picture would be perfect. The child chasing the pigeon. But I'm not taking that shot because, it's so socially, it didn't feel right to me. I wasn't sure who the parents were. And, I didn't want to be that person who was like, oh, weirdo, what are you trying to phone my kid for? I'm actually just trying to take a photo of the pigeons and the movement. Oh, really? Yeah. So, I think we're all aware of it. And I think particularly with social media and Facebook and all that kind of stuff, everybody's a bit aware of their privacy. So it is a consideration. And I think, it probably is another thing that when I'm thinking about on the streets and people are in the scenes, you're a bit like, oh yeah, I don't want that person to kind of confront me and go, whoa, what are you taking a photo of? Why are you taking my photo? And I completely get it. But a lot of people say you generally just blend into the background, I think, and that's why a phone's quite handy sometimes because you can just hold. Everybody's. And this was another thing I saw on that day in Trafalgar Square was, or actually, it was another challenge later on. We were supposed to do some stuff around hand portraits. Everybody was walking around holding the phone. Everybody these days walks around holding their phones. Maybe not in the suburbs and the cities you mentioned because you get your phone nicks. But everybody's got a phone in their hand. So actually, holding a phone in your hand is, people just assume you're doing, you're doing texting. If you can kind of be quite, subversive with it and just kind of hold it down at an angle, you're right. You bring a camera up, particularly if you bring a camera in front of your face. That's something else I heard somebody say, is that, as soon as you bring, people are used to seeing your face. As soon as you stick a camera in front of it, then it, subconsciously it breaks the normal rules, and your eyes will be like, well, "What's that?" So having a camera where, and this is where the Ricoh doesn't work, and an iPhone doesn't work. But if you've got a camera like, I use Sony's as well. I do have big cameras, but you have flip screens, and shooting from your hip with that down, people see you looking down. They don't think anything of it. They're looking at you, not necessarily the camera. So those sort of tilt and flip screens do help, I think, in those situations, give you opportunities. But again, sorry, I've just rambled on there, and I've completely lost where we came
No,
from.
you're fine. You're fine. So the questions are basically me leading the guest to ramble, which is what I want.
Good.
So I get the guest to do my work for me.
Yeah,
so I'm
yeah.
like, okay, go ahead. Yeah. So you said your main big camera is a Sony?
Yeah. So I used to always have Canons. My first SLR was a Canon 50E, which I have now got one, a film camera. So I'm gonna have to get one. I have got one again now. But yeah, so I always had Canons for many years. But again, when I looked to get back into taking it a bit more, I thought I'm going to get myself a new camera. I'm a bit of a gear freak. I kind of like, I find I'm a technology background. I just love tech. So So, and at that point, that was when everything was the mirrorless cameras were out. Canon would release those, but at the time, Canon didn't have many. I think it's the RF lenses, their mirrorless lenses, and what they did have were extremely expensive. So you're a bit like, well, yeah, I could get a Canon body, which I know, but then I'm going to have to put old glass on with a converter, or I'm going to have to, Whereas the Sony system, had plethoras of lenses. Everybody made, Tamron, Sigma, they all made lenses for them. And from what I could see, on the online reviews, everybody raved about how good the Sonys were. So yeah, I at that point I made the decision to pivot into Sony. And yeah, so my big cameras as such are Sonys. And if I'm going somewhere, I will take those with me if I'm going somewhere, and I'm happy to carry a bag and stuff like that. Or if I want the flexibility, obviously, in terms of focal length, because I'm going somewhere and I'm not sure what I'm going to shoot. Am I going to shoot some architecture, want something wide? Am I going to want something where I can get in a bit closer? And then I can obviously change the lens or have a zoom lens on it that gives me a bit more flexibility. So yeah, both my big cameras are Sony's.
Which model do you have? I'm just curious because I shoot Sony as well.
Yeah, so I've got two, as you do. So I've got the A7. So I started with the A7C, and because I shoot again, as I was shooting this weekend, I tend to photograph ultra marathons and stuff. I needed two bodies for that sort of stuff, and having a backup body, but also allows me then to run two lenses at the same time. So I've got an A7R5 again because I wanted something that was better for landscapes and stuff at the time. And the one thing with the A7C, I love the A7C. The one thing I didn't like was because it didn't have the front wheel for the which I can use generally to control the aperture, because I typically shoot manual. So when the A7C2 came out, I immediately just upgraded and swapped it in. So now I've got an A7C2 and an A7.
Those C2s are phenomenal cameras. Yes. I have the 7.3 and 7.4.
Yeah.
I wanted to get the R5 for the resolution, but I shoot a lot of video as well.
Yes.
So, and I like the 4 better for video. It has better low light performance for video.
Yeah, and I think and I completely agree. I think at the time, because I had a C, and I was actually, the C's pretty good at video as well, and I don't shoot that much video, but I thought if I want to shoot video, the C is very good. I used to have a 4 as well. I upgraded the 4 to the R5, and that was my logic, was thinking, well, I've got the C that I can use for video if I need to, and I have done a little bit of video, but then if I want the big megapixels, again, then I've got the R5, which is a phenomenal camera.
You said you picked up a film. Do you shoot film?
Yeah, I do a bit. I've had a film, because I got a film camera for Father's Day last June, actually. I think got an old Canon AE1, which the boys bought me.
Oh.
Yeah, lovely camera, and I've put a couple of rolls through that, and then, like you, it's like, and then I was like, well, I said the EOS 50E was one that I had back in the day, and love that camera. So I thought I'll get one of those. So I've got one of those, and I've also got I'll pick it up because it's here, the old Olympus Muji.
Oh,
Again, I had one of
yeah.
these back in the day. I used to take this with me when I was mountaineering. So again, before we had kids, we used to do lots of alpine mountaineering and stuff. And this was great because you could just stick it in your pocket. It was bomb-proof. So I've got one of those as well. The problem I've got now is I've got so many film cameras, and you just kind of, you're like, it's unlike digital where you just pick it up, go and take shots, download them, you're done. It's like, well, I've got to remember, I've got a roll of film on that one, a roll of film on that one, right? and and of course, it's, film is extortionately expensive to develop. I'm assuming it's the same over there as is here. So I think I said to you earlier on Substack, I've got a box right down here which I bought probably about 6 months ago, thinking, well, I'm just going to develop my own black and white shots. I shoot a lot in black and white. I'm happy just to shoot black and white through film. I'll just get the kit and do it myself. So yeah, so short answer to the question is yes, I do shoot film, but not as much as I'd like to. But then, so the big thing I have, this one
No, you're fine.
is the patience for shooting the film. So I'll take the film camera out and you'll take the shot and you're like, but I really want to see it now. So what I invariably end up doing is I invariably have a digital camera with me anyway, and I'm taking the same shot digitally. So it's like I end up with 2 copies of it anyway, and then you're like, by the time the film comes, you're like, yeah, I've already seen that.
What got me out of that habit, because I would take the digital camera with the film camera and then shoot the same thing, and then by the time the film was done, I'm like, well, this is stupid. And I would have my phone and a film camera, and I do not prefer to shoot on my phone, even though I bought my phone just for photo. And I think it helped me focus, be more comfortable with shooting on film. But I do I'll take one good photo at the beginning of the roll and be like, I have to burn through this roll just so I can develop this roll and see what this is.
Yeah.
I had to start buying film in bulk and then rolling it, because I was like, I am spending so much money on this. With bulk rolling, let's use the 500T for example. So that's usually between $8 to $12 a roll right now. And I've got my cost down to $4 a roll, which is much more manageable for me. So I bulk roll it, and then I self-develop, which the kit was $20 from Cinestill. And I have developed 8 or 10 rolls through that, and it's still going strong, no issues. So my cost for developing film and shooting film really aren't that high. It's higher than digital, but it's more rewarding to me. Even if the photos aren't great, don't get me wrong, I love the high resolution digital, and I still shoot a ton of digital. But the film for me is just, it's tactile and it's fun, and I kind of like the smell of chemicals I'm not supposed to be smelling.
Yeah, I mean, I get that. It's the same as when people say, printing a photo makes it a thing. With digital photos, and I guess ultimately it's probably not so much with film photos, but you have the negative. But once you scanned it, it's just a thing, and it goes into your Lightroom catalog or whatever your film processing software is of choice. And we end up with all these things just buried as ones and zeros on our computers. But actually taking one of those and printing it and sticking it on your wall, or even just holding it in your hand. I'm working on a zine project at the moment, which I need to pick back up, and I just printed out little contact proofs of all the pictures, and just being able to sit there and just flick through them with your hands. It just gives you a much different feeling. So I completely get that actually, shooting film and then developing it yourself. Not only have you crafted and created the image, using the camera, but you've then actually, yourselves taken it with your own hands and a bit of chemical assistance along the way and created the final product. So I know, interestingly, again, on this Encounters thing I was on, there was another Giles Penfanner was there. He was a famous documentary photographer here in the UK, and he does all his own developing, and he says the same thing. It's a very tactile, it's a very mindful process, but actually, what you create at the end of it generally has more meaning to you, because you've actually had to almost, I guess, work harder to get it. So I want to get there. I'd love to do that. It's just time. I mean, how long does it take you to process a roll of film then, out of interest?
Black and white, I use Rodinal and Ilfofix, and I usually shoot 400, and it's based on time. And my development is usually 11 minutes for 400 speed film. So it's 11 minutes in the 11 minutes in the Patterson tank for developer, and then 4 minutes for the fixer, and then it's dry time, and then scanning, I'd say probably half an hour.
And do you have a dedicated scanner, or do you use a digital camera to shoot the negatives?
I use my A7 III and a home built copy stand. Instead of buying, I'm cheap. I am notoriously cheap. Frugal. We'll say frugal.
It's fine
Frugal
if it
sounds
works.
better than
Yeah.
cheap.
Yeah, it does.
But
Yeah.
I have a self-rigged scanning setup right here beside me. Actually, it's just some black pipe, some an old frame out of a picture frame for the glass, and then I bought a little film carrier plate at a secondhand market, and I
Okay.
just use a little, I use a little scanning light that my buddy gave me. It's nothing fancy. I think I have maybe $65 wrapped up in the whole setup, and then I bought extension rings for the A7 III, and I usually use my A7 III to scan. But scanning is the worst
Yeah.
part. Scanning, making sure everything's flat.
That's what I've heard. Yeah.
But I think I
Yeah.
have a system down mostly now. I've gotten rid of a lot of my vignetting and everything, but it's just one of those things where I'm like, I want to get a dedicated scanner, but holy shit, those prices are insane, man. What are the film prices like over there?
They're not cheap. Well, it depends on the stock you shoot, but I mean, like Porsche 400s. I mean, you're looking at 10 pounds a roll
Yeah.
plus. You know, actually, you might be looking. So again, buying it, she's more than 10 pounds a roll, actually, significantly more. But I think you start buying it in bulk packs. You know, you're talking. You know, that's the cheaper way to get it. But you could be paying like 70 odd quid for a pack of, I think it's 5 or something like that. Cadet Gold's cheaper, but he's still. I mean, it's multiple pounds for a roll of film, and then obviously if you're paying to have it processed, I mean you could be down, to buy the film and to get it developed. I suspect you're 20 to 30 pounds for the roll and the development, if you're paying somebody else to do it. So again, the same as you, it's like trying to bulk buy the film helps, because obviously you then get the per roll down, and then it's just shopping around and deciding, which is why it's like, if you can do it yourself, that kind of, for me, it was that question of not necessarily cost, but trying to reduce that time, because at the time I was sending a film off and it was taking weeks to come back. But again, I found something quicker now. But you're like actually wanting that tactile experience, but also wanting to speed the process up. So I'm keen to do it. It's just a question. I just need to do it, really. I just need to finish a roll of film and then just commit to do it. Yeah.
You do. You'll do great at it. The trick is to just go out and burn through a roll of film as fast as you can, so it's nothing that you're going to be devastated if you lose it. So, because I have plenty of rolls. I've just got a box of old rolls of film that I know aren't worth anything. Like, I scanned them and everything, but at the end of the day, they're just sitting in a box because I'm not archiving them, because I knew it was trash. It was just me getting comfortable with
that's
developing.
a good point, actually. Just go out and I'm just going to walk out for the next 2 hours and just shoot off 36 shots or whatever it is, and it doesn't matter if they're good or bad, just because my plan is to use that to perfect the developing technique, and if it works, it works. If it doesn't, it's not the end of the world.
When I first started shooting film, I actually bought a bulk roll right off the bat. I was like, I'm gonna self-roll these so I don't feel bad about spending so much money. So it's just a matter of justifying the film cost to yourself and being willing to risk the loss of those images. With digital's a safety net for me.
Yeah.
Because we have the benefit of being able to take 3 million pictures across 4 SD cards now. But when I'm shooting with this, I usually load up with 24 exposures, and that's it. And I am so terrified of ruining one of those frames now. People say it makes you slow down and focus on photography. And I think that is important even with digital, which shooting film has made me.
And I completely get that when I've done it. It's, I am that classic, I'll take a shot and I will generally just take multiples. You'll be like, oh, just in case it's a bit of shake, just in case something happened, just in case the tree's in the wrong place, because I can just go, or it'll be like, I'll take a composition. I go, oh, actually, what about this composition over here? So rather than slowing down, as you say, and refining the shot, I'm almost doing it as I'm going along, going, well, that works quite well. Oh, I'll try this one over here. What about in portrait? What about in that? But because it's digital, it costs you just, so you end up with, like, for what's arguably one shot, you can end up with 20, 30 shots, but obviously, well, you're not going to do that with film because that's one whole reel. So actually, I can see it does slow you down, and you're almost like, do I really want to press this shutter button because that's going to cost me £1? That's £1 every time I do that.
That's exactly what it is.
It's like, do I want to do that? Could I make it better? And then, to what we were talking about earlier, you really are then thinking about your composition, thinking about, have I got everything just where I want it and all this kind of stuff. So it's it does. I do find it makes you slow down. I have seen a few people. I think James Popsis did a video YouTube last year where he did a thing where he went out with a digital camera and said, right, I'm going to take I'm going to shoot digital evidence. Right, I'm going to take myself 36 shots. I'm limited to 36 shots on this walk. That's all I can do. So he kind of used a digital camera, but approached it as if he had the limitations of film. I guess you can naturally put those sort of ring fences around, guardrails around what you're doing to try and force yourself to do that. But yeah, the film will definitely force your hand there, won't it?
There's definitely a learning curve with it. Digital, you can salvage yourself a lot and post, and film just hurts your feelings consistently. It's like being in an abusive relationship.
My limited understanding of it. The other thing is it's the other extreme where in digital you're told to preserve your highlights because you can generally recover from the shadows. Where in film it's the other way around. It's like actually you need to almost over push it. And again, trying to have that mentality when you're looking at it, you're trying to think, I'll underexpose because I know I can recover it later on. And then of course you do that in film and you're like, yeah, that was a bit stupid. Exactly. So it's kind of just, you have got to completely change your mindset and think through those sort of things. And of course, obviously not having that kind of live, if you've got an SLR or whatever, then you can see what the thing, but you don't get you don't get the adjustments that you get obviously with digital or mirrorless, particularly where it's saying, well, that's what it's going to look like. As you change the aperture, everything just changes and it gives you an instant feedback. It's like, actually, I've got to really think through, have I got the right aperture? I'm using the light meter and all that kind of stuff, which again, you just get lazy with digital and don't use that stuff as much. So
I think that shooting film I'm not trying to be a film snob because I'm not. I don't care what people shoot. I love shooting any camera. I've got some real bad cameras that I hate. Like have you seen the ads for these little Camp Snap cameras?
Yes, I have seen the ads. Yeah, online. Yeah.
I got suckered into buying this thing, and it shoots 8 megapixels. It is not great quality, but I have shot so many awesome photos on this stupid ass little camera that it was like I don't know what it'd be in pounds or anything, but it's $60. I think they're down to $40 now.
Yeah, I think that's the little price. It's definitely under £100 when I've seen them advertised. Yeah,
I'll shoot on any camera, but film in particular, it's made me focus on the composition, and it's just I don't know how I got suckered into this. I know whose fault this is. This is YouTube's fault, is what this is, really.
Yeah, it has a lot to
Yes, it is. One thing that I didn't ask, and I've meant to ask, is how did you get involved in photography in the first place?
So well, I think it's I've always had a bit. I mean, so I'm now in my early 50s. I mean, my first camera was when I was 10, 11 years old. Had you probably remember them, the ones that would look like a horizontal bar of chocolate. You look through, and then you thumb the actual. I remember one of those, and played around with cameras and stuff like that. But I know the first camera. I remember soon after I graduated from university. Fiance at the time, wife now. We bought ourselves. That's when we bought the EOS 50E, Canon EOS 50E. So I've always had an interest in photography and always had cameras around. And I had the Fuji and stuff, which would take with me when I was going. Fuji's the Olympus Muji, which I'd have with me when I was going. We were going out into the mountains and climbing and stuff like that. So taking snaps and stuff. But I guess for me, like most people, it was when digital came, and you could immediately get hold of your images and get them back, and so upgraded. So I'd say my first serious camera was in my early 20s, and had various iterations of Canon, SLRs and then DSLRs. Canon point and shoots, had like Canon power shots, the Canon it's just a little silver thing. There are various things like that, compact cameras. But I guess once
like one of these,
like one of those, exactly like one of those little guys. That's it. Most of which I haven't got anymore, which I'm really gutted about now, because you were just like, I'll just get rid of that, something like that. But then I guess for me, as I think I mentioned earlier, it was, I guess, the iPhone, introduced a lot. Suddenly having a camera on your phone meant that I always had a camera with me. And obviously in the early days they were rubbish, but it meant, you didn't have to consciously think when you went out, I've got to take a camera with me. And if you got an SLR, you got to take the bag with you and stuff like that. It was like the camera was always in my back pocket. And I guess in the last sort of 10, 15 years is where I really started to take a lot of snaps. So I got into ultra endurance running. I was doing a lot of races in mountains and places like that. And I'd be out running ridiculously length training runs at dawn and things like that, and seeing things. And, I was taking a lot of photographs and sharing them on Instagram from those, really, that's where they were mainly just me just running, pulling my iPhone out, taking a snap of what I want, stick it up on Instagram, stick it on my Facebook page, stick it in my Strava feed, whatever. That was kind of how I did it. And when I was competing in races, I was also doing the same thing, taking photos and stuff like that, and then sharing them afterwards. And then people were like, "Oh wow, that photo's amazing! I'm in that photo. Can I have a copy of that photo? And can I do this?" And then some people would be writing a magazine article, and they'd be going, "Oh, can we have your photos to use in the magazine article and stuff like that?" And I was even lucky enough to have in fact, it's right here on the wall beside me. I can show you this.
Yeah,
I've got it. My wife got it framed for me. I've got probably this shot here.
Oh yeah.
So this was actually taken with an iPhone. This is years ago. This was taken with an iPhone. I don't even know what version it is. It was pre-iPhone 10. And it was on an ultramarathon race called the Felsman. And I was running with these two people, and we just left a checkpoint, and we were walking to drop off the edge of this side and then traverse along. And I just saw the light, saw the shadows, human element. Even then, back then, I was doing it. So it was a landscape scene with human elements in it. And I just pulled my phone out and I took the shot. And I think for this, my photos were used in an article in this ultra running magazine. But what the editor did, Andy, he was so taken by this shot, he actually made this the cover image. So it's a wrapped cover image. So that the covers, here wherever how we did it, and it became the wrapped cover image for and that's just using an iPhone. So that's kind of, I guess, where I started to get what you class as success, I suppose, with photographs. And then I guess after a period of time where I got kind of quite well known for taking some shots of running shots and things like that, I was like, that's where then I had I was unwell 3 or 4 years ago now. I had burnout through work. We just set up a new business, and I basically burnt myself out, drew myself on the ground. I had about 5 months off work recovering, and it was that point, exactly as you said, I started looking at YouTube a lot, discovered all these photography channels, Nigel Dance and some people like this as well, going, oh yeah, that looks really good. Landscape photography is a thing, and away I went. And so that's when I thought, oh, maybe I ought to get I'm doing all right with an iPhone, maybe I'll go and get maybe if I do all right with an iPhone, maybe I can go and get a better camera and see what I can do with that. And that's where I went again. So yeah, so kind of always taking photos, but probably the running, got me into it using an iPhone. And then more recently I've kind of, broadened out, beyond just running photographs, and actually now, as you said, shoot anything and everything, and with all sorts of different cameras.
I've actually enjoyed this conversation quite a bit. I don't get out of the house much, but thank you so much for doing this.
Yeah, sure.
Was there any questions you had for me or anything like that?
No, the questions the questions I was going to ask was around the developing, which we covered in the discussion. So yeah, I was just interested to hear more about that, which we obviously just talked about. So that's,
if you do decide to get into the developing, I prefer color developing. It's so much easier than black and white, just because there's shorter time and the results are faster. If that makes sense.
Because I always thought it was the other way around. I thought because there were more stages if you were doing colour, so therefore it would take longer. So that's why I went black and white. I thought, oh yeah, the colour's more complicated and you need more chemicals and stuff. But that's not the case, is it?
It's the same amount of chemicals. It's just one pre-bath beforehand. I don't usually do a pre-bath before my black and white development. Black and white's just more finicky, to where you can get more bromide drag or surging.
Okay.
So you have a higher chance of ruining your images of black and white.
Okay.
I've only ever had it happen with one chemical in particular that really ruined my day a couple times, and I switched over to Rodinal. It hasn't happened so much since then, but with color, it was, what you're going to get every time, especially with C41 color simplified from Cinestill. The color comes out exactly what it's supposed to be every time. And I think the kit's $20. You can get 24 rolls out of it or something like that.
Okay, cool. Oh, I'll maybe look into that then. Because, yeah, I went down a black and white route just because I assumed color would be more complicated.
I did the same thing.
Yeah. Okay. Oh, that's definitely interesting to know. And, I probably need to get back on YouTube and do a bit more research.
Yeah, there's You're gonna spend some money, man.
Yeah,
Sorry,
yeah,
I sent you down
yeah.
the
I'll find more camera
the gear
bags and
rabbit hole.
cameras and all sorts of stuff while I'm rooting around. You know, God, I can't help myself.
All right. Well, thank you so much for appearing. I appreciate it, and I'll make sure to put all your links in the
Thank you.
comment section and everything for you to everybody to check out. And I'll probably be talking to you again soon.
Will do. Great to have the conversation. Enjoyed
All
it,
right.
Justin, and good luck with the podcast.